In the small, forgotten town of Raven's Hollow, whispers of dark magic and ancient curses lingered in the air. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about Ezekiel Blackwood, the dreaded sorcerer who had terrorized their ancestors. His reign of darkness had ended abruptly one stormy night when the villagers, in a desperate bid for freedom, had banded together and burned him at the stake. But Ezekiel, with his dying breath, had cursed them all. Decades later, the legend of Ezekiel Blackwood was little more than a chilling tale told to frighten children. That is, until the night his body was discovered. Deep in the woods, a group of hikers stumbled upon a hidden crypt. Inside lay the perfectly preserved corpse of the sorcerer, eyes closed as if merely sleeping. Terrified, they alerted the authorities, and soon, Ezekiel's body was transported to the town morgue for examination. The town's only mortician, Dr. Eliza Turner, was a rational woman who didn't believe in curses or dark magic. She prided herself on her scientific mind and had seen countless bodies in her career. But as she prepared to examine Ezekiel's remains, a strange unease settled over her. The air in the morgue felt thick and oppressive, and the lights flickered sporadically. Ignoring the growing sense of dread, Dr. Turner began her examination. As she made the first incision, the temperature in the room plummeted. Her breath became visible, forming small clouds of vapor in the frigid air. She tried to steady her hands, but an inexplicable fear gnawed at her insides. The power surged, and the lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. The emergency generator kicked in, casting eerie shadows with its dim, flickering light. Dr. Turner continued her work, but every cut and probe felt wrong. Suddenly, a low, guttural whisper filled the room, though she was alone. The voice spoke in an ancient tongue, its words crawling into her ears like spiders. Dr. Turner froze, her scalpel slipping from her grasp. The corpse of Ezekiel Blackwood began to twitch. His eyes snapped open, glowing with an unnatural, malevolent light. She stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. The sorcerer's body rose from the table, an unholy grin spreading across his decayed face. "You should not have disturbed me," he hissed, his voice echoing with the whispers of the damned. The shadows in the room grew darker, writhing and reaching out like tendrils. Dr. Turner tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. She backed into a corner, watching in horror as the sorcerer's corpse took slow, deliberate steps toward her. As he drew nearer, the air grew colder, and her limbs felt heavy, as if an invisible force were holding her in place. Ezekiel's rotting hand reached out, and the moment his icy fingers touched her skin, a searing pain shot through her body. Her vision blurred, and darkness consumed her. The next morning, the townsfolk found the morgue in disarray. Dr. Turner was nowhere to be found, and the body of Ezekiel Blackwood was gone. All that remained was a single blood-stained scalpel and a cryptic message scrawled on the wall in ancient runes. Raven's Hollow would never be the same. The curse of Ezekiel Blackwood had been awakened, and the darkness he had once brought upon the town was beginning to stir once more. The sun set on Raven's Hollow, casting long, eerie shadows over the town. The residents, gripped by fear, locked their doors and windows, whispering prayers and clinging to whatever talismans they believed might protect them. Rumors of Dr. Turner's disappearance and Ezekiel Blackwood's reanimated corpse spread like wildfire, feeding the growing panic. Late that night, in the depths of the forest, an old, abandoned cabin stood silent and foreboding. Inside, a single candle flickered, casting a weak light on the figure of Dr. Eliza Turner, who sat bound to a chair, her eyes wide with terror. She was surrounded by ancient symbols carved into the wooden floor, glowing with an eerie green light. Ezekiel Blackwood stood before her, his decayed face twisted into a malevolent grin. "You thought you could defile my remains and escape unscathed," he rasped, his voice filled with ancient malice. "But now you will serve me." Dr. Turner struggled against her bonds, but they tightened with every movement, cutting into her skin. She could feel the dark magic in the air, seeping into her very soul. Ezekiel began to chant in a language long forgotten, and the symbols on the floor pulsed with a sinister energy. Back in the town, strange occurrences began to unfold. Shadows moved on their own, and whispers echoed through the streets, calling the townsfolk by name. People reported seeing ghostly apparitions of long-dead ancestors, their eyes empty and filled with sorrow. The air grew thick with an oppressive sense of dread, and a palpable darkness seemed to cloak the town. At the heart of this growing chaos was the old church, its once comforting presence now a place of fear. The bell tolled at random, each chime sending shivers down the spines of those who heard it. Inside, the pews were empty, but a figure stood at the altar, shrouded in a dark cloak. It was Father Donovan, the town's priest, who had taken it upon himself to confront the evil that had awakened. Father Donovan, clutching a worn and ancient tome, recited prayers and incantations, his voice trembling. He knew he was no match for the dark power of Ezekiel Blackwood, but he hoped to at least delay the inevitable. As he continued his desperate pleas, the shadows in the church began to coalesce, forming the spectral figure of Ezekiel. "You cannot stop me, priest," Ezekiel's voice echoed, cold and mocking. "Your faith is powerless against my curse." Father Donovan's heart pounded as he faced the sorcerer's ghost. "I will not let you harm this town," he declared, his voice stronger than he felt. He raised the tome, chanting an ancient spell passed down through generations. The symbols within the book glowed, filling the church with a brilliant light. For a moment, Ezekiel's form wavered, and a blood-curdling scream filled the air. But the light quickly faded, and the sorcerer reformed, stronger than before. He reached out, his ghostly hand passing through Father Donovan's chest. The priest gasped, feeling an icy grip on his heart. "You will be the first to fall," Ezekiel whispered, his eyes burning with hatred.